We laugh. We cry. We learn. But really, what doesn't kill you makes you better at managing clients and everyone. I'm Morgan Friedman, and this is Client Horror Stories.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Client Horror Stories. I'm excited to have with me Mike Patino today. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I feel bad I was a little bit late, but also I'm excited to share this world record with all of our viewers, which is you have the greatest distance in time between our original call, which was in like February, and our actual recording. It's never taken this long before, but I'm happy that the day is finally here.
You're that busy with all of these other episodes that you're recording. I think it's a testament to just how popular your podcast is.
I appreciate your positive interpretation of everything. And now that the day is here and I have my coffee with whiskey in hand, let's jump in. I am all ears to hear your worst client horror story.
So as I said to you when we talked so long ago, you were looking for a story that impacted me as a business owner and as an entrepreneur and as a leader. And I'll say, unfortunately, the story is less about the client being a horror and more the horror that we felt about a situation that occurred with a client. So a number of years ago.
By the way, I just want to interrupt you because the whiskey is already getting to me. Before even hearing the story, even if it's less about the client and more about you, those are the best stories, and the best learning experiences, because this person over there is a horrible, terrible person, and I'm perfect. Like, if you're perfect, there's nothing to learn and no way to improve.
Right. No, look, I have plenty of them. They're mostly just very short.
So what happened?
We had been working with a client, a large global manufacturing organization, a number of years ago, and we had placed an executive into their ranks. And about a month into that person's tenure, the hiring manager called me and let me know that they had fired the person that day for cause, which in the 25 years that I've been doing executive search, it's the first time I've had someone fired within the first year. And it's the only third time that anybody's even left within the first year of when we place someone. We really have a good longevity record. So needless to say, I was taken aback that the person hadn't lasted a year. I was completely shocked they were fired. And I said, what happened? Like, please let me know what's going on. Okay. And the hiring manager said, well, the individual lied about having their collegiate degree. And I was kind of surprised. And so we talked about the situation, and it turned out that the person had joined the company and had been delaying filling out the paperwork and kind of pushing it off. And finally, at about the month mark, they kind of put the screws to the person, and it turned out that he had lied about this. Well,
but by the way, I just want to pause and comment on that before we get to what happened next. So there are a few interesting things about already what you shared, which is, first, it's kind of incredible to me that people lie about these like obvious, simple things that are easy to check. Like if I told you I was born 10 years after that I was, it's not hard to look up my birthday. So I don't even understand why people lie on the stupid, lie on the really obvious stuff that takes 2 seconds to check.
So I will tell you, with almost 25 years under my belt, I'm typically shocked when it happens at the executive level, which is where we really operate. But I have about one every 18 months who just tries to pull one over on us. And it's always shocking when it happens. The more it happens in life, the more you get used to it. But at the rank and file, it happens more than anybody would care to realize or admit. And more often than not, the reason why people try is that there's a decent chance that they're going to get away with it, because all it takes is one small step in the process, and this story is unfortunately a good example of that happening, to allow someone to sneak through, right? It can be within HR, it can be within us. I actually have a good friend who went through, who had not received his degree, hadn't lied about it, but the company had made the assumption, and that played out several years into that person's career later on when they were about to become an executive. So it does happen. It happens way more than people would think, but I agree with you.
Interesting. I think there might be a subtle lesson in here worth sharing, which is I'm from New York, and I grew up like a teenager in New York in the Giuliani years, and Giuliani and his police chief, this guy named William Braddon, had a really clever strategy that kind of solved crime in New York back then, clearly 25 years ago, which is basically the philosophy was to come down really hard on the small stuff, because the people who are lying, cheating, stealing on the tiny, tiny things are likely doing so on the bigger scale as well. And I think of this when I think about this story here, where like lying about your college degree like feels like such a stupid thing, and kind of like, if you've been working enough and you're old enough, who even cares if you went to college or not? It kind of doesn't matter. But where this feels so powerful and useful is, okay, if they're lying on these things, what else are they lying on? And what are the bigger things that they're deceiving us on and not telling us on? And that is a huge red flag.
Yes. So I will agree with you on that. And any time that we catch someone, they're done with us, not only for that search, but pretty much forever. Because at the end, the decision to lie about your degree is an ethical one and a judgment one, and you failed both at the same time, again, on something fairly small.
That is a really good point, that these tiny little things reveal your ethical code and it reveals your judgment, and both of those are supremely important.
Absolutely.
Okay, as an excellent little tangent, now back to the story.
So the individual or the hiring manager, explained to us what had happened. I was shocked because as part of our process at Patino Associates, we do, like all major search firms, do degree verifications. We go to the candidate, we ask for their information necessary. It's typically their name and their school and their date of birth. So we make sure we're looking at the right Morgan Friedman, not someone who graduated 20 or 30 years before or after.
And also not looking at a Morgan Freeman who graduated 30 years before and is Black and is an actor.
And so the process is actually quite simple. You literally get those 3 or 4 pieces of information, you plug it into a clearinghouse that really does all of the work for you, which was not the way it was 25 years ago when I first got into the business. But it's very simple today.
And actually, just as a parenthetical, just because I'm fascinated by this, in my mind, I had the assumption that if I want to know like where Michael Patino went to college, I'd have to like go to your college, get permission to get your transcripts or something. But like,
that is what you used to have to do.
How is it today? Out of pure curiosity, nothing to do with client hours.
There's an internet website that does all of the work for you. First of all, almost all universities have digitized their records to begin with. So, right. I mean, honestly, 25 years ago, you would call the school and they would say, okay, they take the information down and they'd go away for 2 or 3 days and they would like go into the stacks and, find the paper transcripts and make photocopies and send them to you or fax them or whatever. So the digitization effort was greatly appreciated by the recruiting industry in this facet. It's easy, right? It's a very easy process for us today.
Yes.
And, if we had done the work, we should have gotten back that he didn't have it. So I admittedly do not do the degree verifications myself, questioned that decision after the fact, but my assistant at the time was conducting that work. And so I needed to know where that degree verification was. as it turned out, my assistant was actually leaving that day for a 4-day weekend overseas. And so I had hung up with the hiring manager. I immediately called the assistant and I said, I need to know where this piece of information is right now. And I was deadly serious. And Patrick knew that something was wrong. And he started asking me like a lot of questions. I knew he was leaving. I said, I can't get into all this right now. I just need the piece of information because I knew the seriousness of him not having the degree. And so he told me where to find it. I hung up. I went and found it. And as it turned out, we had gotten the information back from the clearinghouse, and it said that he didn't have the degree. So
Patrick is the one that messed up here.
We all messed up. I own the responsibility for that as well, right? I mean, in all honesty, I would typically try to at least eyeball, hey,
double check.
Sure. Or just, hey, we got it. It's, it was at the time we were still using paper files in large part. So it was in a paper file. It was nothing for me to pick it up like where we have his resume and his candidate letter and everything else and just review it for a minute, right? So I don't like to put the blame all on one person because I don't think that's really fair. The system broke down.
Sounds like the attitude of a great leader.
Thank you. But now I had it in hand that the person didn't have the degree, and we knew about it because we had the information back from the clearinghouse. We just missed on it. But in the process, we had, as a result, conveyed to the client that they had graduated, right? We put that on their resume. We talk about it in our discussions. So it was there, right? It was out there. And I was really concerned about that fact because they had taken step to fire the executive with cause, which honestly doesn't happen as often as you think anymore, especially at the executive levels. It really means that you've committed a pretty serious transgression against the company. And so I had probably within 5 minutes of learning all of that, picked up the phone and reached out to my longtime lawyer and said, hey, here's everything that happened. Should I be concerned? And my lawyer listened to me for a good 5 or 6 minutes and then kind of sat for another 90 seconds quietly. And he said, well, Michael, I hate to tell you, but technically speaking, this would be considered fraud. And I almost melted into the desk because at that point, we are a small business. It wouldn't take much to destroy us. And it was the smallest and simplest and most honest of mistakes, right? Nobody in our firm was trying to mislead the client, but we helped this individual, this executive, mislead the company into hiring him. And I was...
That's a point that is obvious to lawyers, but less obvious to non-lawyers like us, which is for you to commit fraud does not mean it was intentional. Because here you weren't trying to rip them off, but it's still fraud.
Right. I mean, it's from a legal perspective, and I talk a lot about this with our teams because in this day and age, we have recruiters who view that step of doing the degree verification as like silly. They're like, why do we have to do this? It's an extra, 20 minutes. It's an extra, whatever, $15, $20 that we charge the client. Why do we have to do this over and over again? And the reality is because once out of every few hundred times, someone tries to pull a fast one. And if we don't catch it, we are, because of the conversations that we had all those years ago, potentially in a libelous position. And once you tell a recruiter that, they're like, oh gosh, all right, I'll do what I need to. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty intense Friday afternoon, to say the least.
So after this, what happened next? Because did you speak to Patrick? Did you speak to the client?
I went back to the client. Yeah, I went after I talked to the lawyer. I went back to the client and I said, look, here's the deal. I went and looked. I found the paperwork. The paperwork said he didn't have the degree. We missed it when we reviewed it. And, and I'm terribly sorry. The hiring manager, who to this day is a friend of mine, thankfully, was certainly upset, was certainly unhappy with the situation, but did, I would probably say, with a little bit of time behind them, realized that we weren't obviously trying to pull one over on them. I probably lived in fear for a few weeks that I was going to get a call from a lawyer from this company wanting to depose me. And I had no idea. We were a young, small recruiting firm.
So did you offer to find a new candidate, refund the fee, or?
Yeah, so in our contractual agreement, if for some reason the person doesn't last for a year, our guarantee is that we would do the search again for no cost. The recruiter chose not, or excuse me, the hiring manager chose not to take advantage of that aspect of the contract because they were pretty upset with the fact that we had let this get through on the first case, and so we obviously understood that.
Now, I'm personally irrationally obsessed with improving processes, and something I always tell my teams is I'll never be unhappy with anyone if they make a mistake, but if they make the same mistake more than once, then that's where I get unhappy. And I try to always say when a mistake happens, I look at it as how do we change or update our process so that this doesn't happen again. As a result of this, did you change how you verify, confirm, research, double check, or
more than that? Right. So at that point in time, Patrick, my assistant, was actually supporting both me and another recruiter. And we were both fairly busy. And so the reality was, like I said, it was an oversight, right? But I looked at it and said, okay, we can add the extra step. We can make it a checklist. You can do 1,000 different ways to try to make sure that it happened, right? But what we felt like at that point in time was that we had overloaded Patrick between the workload of two different recruiters, and we felt that now is the time that we needed to change that. I felt the need to change that. And so we went out and actually recruited another assistant, and that person still works with us to this day. So they just celebrated their 12-year anniversary yesterday with us.
So actually, I think there's a powerful lesson
yes,
in how you solved it, which is the following. What happens all the time, and I'll confess sometimes I fall into this trap, is there's a problem and I say, okay, I don't want it to happen again. I'll change the process so it doesn't happen again. But very, very often the change is a Band-Aid. Like a process is broken, but I'll have someone double check it, for example. No, this person sucks. It's always disasters. No, we'll just add a QA person to test it without dealing with the deeper issue. And what I really love and appreciate about your solution is even like my question too is how do you change your process? Did you put on a Band-Aid? Did you hire a QA? But your answer is dude, we went deeper and we realized that the core issue was that this good person was overloaded. So as a result, we've broken into two different roles and found an awesome person that's still around 12 years later for the second role. And I think that's such a good lesson for younger versions of ourselves, which is there's this instinct to do the quick, easy solution because you solved it, it won't happen again. But sometimes you're like, dude, it's expensive to hire a second person, but sometimes that is actually worth it to do.
Look, I'll be really candid with you.
Yeah.
Going into that weekend, I wasn't sure if Patrick was going to be with us on Monday. I was that upset that we had been put in this, as a firm, been put in this position. Yeah. And, I did co-own the responsibility for it, right? I co-own the responsibility just because Patrick reports to me and, whatever he does is in my name on the door.
Ultimately your responsibility.
Exactly. So it took me probably the weekend to kind of bring myself into check and look at the broader situation. I mean, we acknowledged that there was a workload issue, and we felt like, Patrick I've worked with him for a decade. So, I mean, he's been amazing for a number of years. I didn't really want to move him out because of one mistake, but I was thinking about it, right? And the decision to come to let's hire a second person was an important one because we knew that we were busy enough and that we could support it within the business and that it was the right thing to prevent the possibility of these things happening going forward.
By the way, I appreciate that. I also want to point out there's another subtle lesson in there, which is worth pointing out, which is, and you're getting at this before that, to the recruiter doing the check, it's like, this is so minor, who cares? And earlier, when we started the episode, we were saying, okay, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? But there's a separate point about that, which is dotting your I's and crossing your T's, doing these stupid little things is often profoundly important. And lots of things that on the surface can seem like it's a waste of time. It's often the case that there are reasons that you don't know, that you don't understand, why making sure this I is dotted every single time actually is important. Because guess what? If this one stupid little I isn't dotted, we can get huge lawsuits.
Yeah. Yeah. You see it in software development all day long.
Yes. Yeah. Why do I need to QA this software? Nah, I've been playing with the software, building it. It works fine. Anyone that's built software,
you have to believe in it.
Anyone that's built software for more than 5 minutes has seen, well, even though you used it, you didn't try Internet Explorer, and there's still these grandmas looking at the website on Internet Explorer. I'm revealing my age with the ancient reference here, but actually, I think this last point that we've been hitting on is a very underrated one because I want to be a boss. I want to be a good boss, and I give my teams things that they need to do, and all the time these boring, repetitive things that no one wants to do, and often that employees often delay doing because who enjoys just doing the same lookup again and again. But I think from the side of an employee, it's important to understand. I may not understand the reasons why this is important, but if I'm doing a job, it's worth doing it well in every little detail. I think that's the right attitude for the employee or the person facing the client to have. And at the same time, I think the converse is true from the eyes of the boss or the client that hires a person. I think it's your obligation to give as much context as needed to the employee or the professional to do a good job. So often in the beginning, hey, here's a job. Now there are these things that are really boring, but I'm going to spend 5 minutes on your first day to tell you why this check is actually really, really important to do. So in fact, so this problem is kind of solved by both sides being a bit more mature and professional about it. And as a footnote there, something I've even seen some companies do, which is super interesting, I keep on thinking about implementing in mine, is for every process they create, to create a document with a narrative history for why that process came about. Because guess what? Your story about Patrick is going to be forgotten, maybe except for this podcast. Everything will be forgotten in history. And when the company turnover, people change, you look at a process and you're like, why do we even have this process? But having documents to that company process, okay, we implemented this process because 15 years ago, this person forgot to do this verification and it got into this lawsuit. So these are interesting sort of creative ways to try to processify while giving context to help minimize these sorts of problems. Did all that make sense? Or
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was sitting there kind of thinking about the idea of creating that second document every time you create a process. I don't think anybody would get any work done. They'd be papering over all of their processes. So I like the rationale for it, but I don't know that, especially in a large company, whether that's a really good idea. So
that's an interesting comment. I have two responses to that. First, in large companies, no work really happens anyway. I've just seen so many bureaucrats that not much gets done anyway. But that aside, how do we solve these sort of professional communication context challenges? And I think there's a trade-off between the two sides where having context, history, documents to explain things takes up a whole bunch of time, but it really helps solve this problem. On the other hand, without that, then okay, go do it. Great, you can go much faster and get much more done. But every once in a while, these big problems will happen that will bite you in the ass. So part of the trick is finding the right balance between those two extremes that works for your team.
Absolutely. I mean, and as a small firm, we don't have a lot of resources to be bureaucratic, to create process for the sake of creating process. We all, I get in and do a lot of work and get my hands dirty. It's not that I'm kind of running up here and not doing the search work, but it is, how do you create a process that is repeatable, at a high quality, without mistakes, and be able to get people to understand why those things are important. I mean, it's, obviously everybody wants to do good work, right?
Totally.
To your point, if you don't provide even the teensiest bit of context, then people begin to question why certain processes or steps exist, or they look at it and go, yeah, that process has been in place for 20 years. We don't need that process anymore. It's 20 years later. Well, maybe you do and maybe you don't, right? I mean, sometimes processes were created because things were antiquated and not digital 20 years ago. But sometimes the processes do need to be there still, right? And understanding why is an important part of it.
Two observations that I think you and the audience will understand, and then we can wrap up. First, G.K. Chesterton, classic American early 20th century. He's like a very successful journalist at the time, half forgotten his name. He had so many good observations, and one of them is called Chesterton's fence, and it's the following. He said you should never take down a fence without first knowing the reason why that fence was put up. And I really like that as a rule of thumb, because the neighbor has dogs out always come into your property and like eat from the fruits in your garden and so on. So they put up, but you buy the house from the preview. You're like, that fence is ugly. I'm going to take it down. Suddenly there are these dogs eating from your garden. So the contextualizing processes is an interesting way in order to apply Chesterton's fence. By the way, in real time, I just had a business idea. We're having fun drinking some Irish coffees, so I'm going to share it in real time. It's just, as it's talking about Chesterton's fence, I realized that you're right, that your point is actually implementing these contexts for the processes, time-consuming one time to do work. And I just realized this is actually a really interesting use for AI, because AI having access to the company email, the company work platforms, like the AI, the company Google Drive, can probably figure out what's happening. So AI might be able to piece together the context creation for the process. Wow, I kind of want to go.
So I'm gonna put a little grenade in your idea for a moment. There is a software company that does what's called process intelligence.
Wow, interesting. What's their name? I want to go find it.
Oh goodness, now you're gonna make me think about it for 1 second.
Mike, I just had the $1 trillion idea in real time with you, and because of you, I'm not going to make the $1 trillion.
There's actually a couple of them. Celonis was the one I'm thinking of. CELONIS.
And never heard of them.
Yeah, I had until a few weeks ago as well, from some AI work that we're doing, and they do what's called process intelligence, and they basically deploy their AI into your systems, and they look at, if my understanding is correct, this is an oversimplification from they can look at all of the processes, and they can see where the process is broken. They can see where the process is leaking, right? And so their argument is like, you can't have good AI unless you have good PI as well. So
wow, I love it.
There you go.
I know what I'm going to read.
It's a nascent market. There's always room for one more. Please don't let me take your trillion idea away. You're gonna have to execute it.
You have to execute. Yeah, the trillion idea is worth zero unless I actually do it. On implementing these processes, the other concept that is just interesting and worth mentioning is there's a more mathy concept called Dunbar's number, which is the number 150. And what Dunbar's number is, it basically observes that in team dynamics and how groups of people work too, as the team grows, there are different points at which the way you have to work together as a team changes. The original Dunbar's number is 150, and basically originally observed that once a company reaches 150 people, then you need zillions of processes, bureaucracy, things that you just don't need when it's two guys in a closet. In my experience, working from startups to like 3,000 person companies, what I found is I kind of have like three Dunbar's numbers personally, and how I approach these things, of teams of 7, 30, and 150. So what I found is when you're the teams that are under 7 people, you don't even really need process, or you can have like say informal processes. Just give it to this person. Yeah, Marina, check this, do this. Yeah, here's this list. She knows how to interview, ask the people. It's 7 to 30 when you're like about your 8th person, when you're like, okay, you need a bit more structure, you need more clarity, you need to be really clear on the communication and what's happening. And then at 30 people, that's when I found you actually, when you're about 30 people, you need a dedicated HR person, you need processes for this, you'll need Scrum Masters, you'll need a QA, and then that takes you until the 150 point where like the bureaucracy really happens. So, but I'll also add to this question of how much context do we put in. I'd also say it's dependent on the team size in this sort of way as well.
I would absolutely agree with you on that point, Morgan.
I'm glad you agree. I've been meaning to like record something or write something about like my interpretation or extension of Dunbar's numbers, but maybe this is it. Is this nestled in as a gem in this episode of Client Horror Stories?
Something good came out of it after all.
Yeah, I have a goal with every episode to have at least one new insight come out, because in the early episodes it was like, make sure you document everything, and then after a while it's like, yeah, this is like very obvious, being a professional and avoiding problems 101. Get it in writing. They can't make up shit if their name is signed on a piece of paper that says something different. But I have a goal of having at least one new insight in every episode. And we've had some of these ideas like Dunbar's numbers, but even at the beginning, I loved your insight about how providing what university you went to is both an ethical test and a judgment test. And I think that's such an insightful point you made, and it's worth closing out by repeating it, because these little tests that you don't even realize why do they need my university degree? It's really subtle tests of your ethical code and your judgment, and that's so important.
Not intentionally on our behalf, but unfortunately, if you fail the test, right? If you make the wrong choice, it does become those things, right? I mean, I think that's the interesting lesson here, is that there are things that we take for granted on a daily basis, that there's no reason why to break the rule or break the norm. But in doing so, you've kind of revealed who you are at your core by doing just that.
Totally. And that was great point, well said, and the perfect words to end this episode on. Mike, great story, great time, so many good insights. Thank you for this, and everyone who's been watching it. I hope you've been enjoying it as much as we have, and learning as we have been. Thank you for your time, and until next time, everyone.
Thank you, Morgan.